The crops were all dead, and soon the people of Ireland would be as well. The land of rolling green hills and steep seaside cliffs was once home to the healthiest peasant population in all of Europe, thanks to the nutrient-rich Irish lumper potato. But in 1845, the harvest failed. The potatoes turned black, rancid, and inedible almost overnight. The chief domestic food source was now almost entirely destroyed, and any alternative was being shipped across the Irish Sea to the English lords. Famine was underway, and the air began to fill with the smell of rotten soil and perished peasants. The English government was charged with establishing aid for Ireland, but the powerful House of Lords, who fought so fiercely to have Ireland under their control, seemed to be abandoning their responsibility to it. In 1841, 8 million people called Ireland their home. 59 years later, at the dawn of the 20th century, half those people were gone. The majority of these lost Irish would be forced to leave the country, that or face a horrible starvation. Ireland would never again see its pre-famine population. This is the story of a people left to rot.
War between Irish and English peoples had been a constant for centuries, beginning with an English invasion of Ireland in 1169. England's ruling elite saw the Celtic people of Ireland as savages who could not govern themselves. Ireland had been a flourishing civilization for centuries, with their own language, traditions, music, and culture. The 700-year-long battle between the two seemingly ended in 1801. The new Act of Union colonized and integrated Ireland into the United Kingdom. Irish land, politics, and people were all now legal property of the English state. The Irish Catholics, 80% of the country, became second-class citizens to the Protestant English landlords. Most of this ruling elite never actually lived in Ireland. From the comfortable English mainland, they collected rent from tenants they would rarely, if ever, see. From 1801 onward, many Irish families tended farms they didn't own. They grew food they often couldn't keep. Threat of eviction loomed over their heads. This drove most Irish families into poverty by the mid-1820s.
Mostly poor farmers, the Irish depended largely on one staple crop, the Irish lumper potato. Potatoes first reached Ireland in the 1580s from South America. The Irish lumper potato in specific was first bred in 1808, 7 years after England officially took control of Ireland. During this period, English landlords had started confiscating and owning properties, taking the best land for profitable crops and livestock. As part of Irish culture, it was tradition to give your oldest son a bit of land, so property among peasants would be divided into smaller and smaller sections over time. Irish farmers were left to make do with small portions of poor land. In this environment, the lumper potato became valuable, not because of its taste, but because it could be grown on poor land and still yield enough food for the farmers and their families. Despite its poor flavor, the lumper potato provided 2.6 million people, 1/3 of Ireland's population, with their breakfast, lunch, and dinner. In 1844, a fungus called Phytophthora infestans was brought from South America to mainland Europe. While the infestation was harmful, farmers in mainland Europe relied on a larger variety of crops for their food source, curbing the impact of the blight. But the fungal infestans did not stay in the mainland. It spread. By 1845, it had made its way to Ireland. When farmers checked their fields, they found that the leaves of the potato plants were black and wilted. The potatoes themselves had rotted from the inside. The initial level of worry was low. Bad harvests were not unheard of, and farmers still had backup supplies of seed potatoes for next year. However, come 1847, things were about to get much, much worse.
Stores of surplus potatoes were eaten after the first poor harvest. But after the potatoes that the farmers had saved for the next season also failed to produce any edible harvest, the people were left with their cellars empty and nothing to eat. Charles Trevelyan, the foreign minister in charge of handling the worsening situation in Ireland, had reluctantly opened several hundred soup kitchens around the areas most impacted by the blight. However, come 1847, Trevelyan would show his true colors to the Irish people. He closed the soup kitchens. He stopped importing food to the island. In fact, he increased exports from the island, wringing out Ireland's already small supply of wheat, corn, cows, and dairy. 3 million Irish, who relied on these food sources to survive while their potatoes were blighted, now had no viable food to eat, and thousands would die. Trevelyan called the Irish a, quote, idle, ungrateful, and rebellious country, an indolent and unself-reliant people. This sentiment echoed throughout the English press, and soon became the opinion of most English people. Trevelyan openly spoke of withholding aid for the Irish people as a holy and righteous thing. He claimed, "The judgment of God sent the calamity to teach the Irish a lesson, that calamity must not be too much mitigated. The real evil with which we have to contend is not the physical evil of the famine, but the moral evil of the selfish, perverse, and turbulent character of the Irish people." At first, the absence of violent deaths in this crime might make the English seem less evil, but in reality, starvation is a slow and torturous death. When the human body runs out of nutrients, it starts to cannibalize itself. Muscle, fat, and tissue are all devoured, leaving your body a shell of itself. There is no longer enough energy to power vital organs like your kidneys, lungs, heart, or brain. You get weaker and weaker, everything begins to hurt. You feel irritable, apathetic, and lethargic, unable to focus on anything besides the pain that slowly consumes your entire being. It is a horrendous fate, lasting for months upon months until you finally wither away. This was how millions of Irish families spent their final moments. In 1847 alone, 400,000 Irish people starved to their death. While the Irish had already suffered during the previous 2 years of crop failure, this deliberate starving of the island and its people was an astounding period of horror. The immense suffering imposed by Trevelyan earned this year the name Black 47. Adding to the horrible conditions, it was English policy that in order to receive any form of aid from the English, able-bodied Irish men were forced to work extensive labor in warehouses across the country. This population, already starving and weak, were pushed to the brink just to survive. This policy was cited as a clause of the Irish Poor Act of 1838, and therefore was legally protected. In addition, the English landlords, 90% of the landlords in Ireland, began to evict families whose crops had failed, forcing those already starving Irish onto the streets with no home to return to. By 1849, more than 1 million Irish lay dead, perished from starvation.
M. Cummins, the magistrate of Irish County Cork, wrote a letter to the Duke of Wellington describing the horrible conditions of the starving Irish people. Upon arriving, I found a village seemingly deserted. I entered a few homes. In the first, I saw 6 ghosts or skeletons sprawled in the back of a room, in an obscure corner, on top of hay, all sharing a bad horse cover for a blanket. I approached these unfortunate people, and I saw that they were consumed by a burning fever. All 6, the husband, his wife, and the 4 children holding each other. The potato famine was considered to have finally concluded in 1852. The crops were stable, the death rate tapered off, but the destruction the famine brought would never be undone. The population loss hit the hardest in the west and southwest of the island. Some areas saw a loss of over 50% of their total population in just 10 years. Perhaps not so coincidentally, the areas in which the most Irish were starved were also the areas which held the strongest bastions of Irish culture. The music, traditions, and language of the Irish people remained largely untouched by Western English influence, until the famine. In the aftermath, many Irish people in this region would die or flee the country, where they would lose their language and many cultural traditions over generations. Today, the Irish language is in danger of being lost completely, and the Irish don't even control their entire island. Northern Ireland is still British, a topic of much tension throughout the years. The tragic destruction and Anglification of Irish culture left a permanent mark on the country. In addition to the 1 million deaths from the famine, another 2 million would be forced to flee the country. Between 1850 and 1900, Ireland's population would decline by 50%. It would never recover. These people fled across oceans, most notably to the United States. Modern day, more than 40 million Americans claim Irish ancestry. In 1850, the United States had 1 million Irish citizens, half of which were born in Ireland. To this day, the Irish diaspora accounts for 80 million people across the globe.
Many people consider the Irish potato famine nothing more than that, a famine. But considering the mass evidence of racism, contempt, and the purposeful withholding of food from the Irish people, it may be time to reevaluate. The Irish suffered a great loss under English rule, and it wasn't by accident. Charles Trevelyan in particular clearly intended to destroy the Irish, at least in part, and framed it as a holy and righteous thing. At the very least, this is a mass crime, perhaps even a genocide. The English aristocrats orchestrated a famine that killed millions and displaced millions more, abandoning Ireland at its most dire moment and bringing an entire culture to the brink of destruction. The Irish were a people left to rot.
Oh, I thought I heard the old man say, "Leave her, Johnny, leave her. It's a long, hard pull till the next payday, and it's time for us to leave her. Leave her, Johnny, leave her. Oh, leave her, Johnny, leave her. For the voyage is done and the winds don't blow, and it's time for us to leave her. Leave her, Johnny, leave her. Oh, leave her, Johnny, leave her. For the voyage is done and the winds don't blow, and it's time for us to leave